Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to tell you about this sword right here. It is a custom Katzbalger from Landsknecht Emporium on loan from sword friend Ian. So first, special thanks to sword friend Ian for lending me his stuff for the better part of a year at this point. It's been great to handle, to play with, to experience, and it gives me a chance to share with fellow sword friends. So much appreciated. This is, again, on loan from sword friend Ian. I have to return it in good working order. I'm not going to deliberately break it, but I have cut some things with it. Not exactly gingerly either, and it's held up, and I'll show that footage later in this review. Also note that I don't study historic European martial arts. This is a second-hand sword. Sword friend Ian has said he's not particularly gingerly. His swords are not safe queens, in his words. So they're used, and some of the scuffs and pings and dings might be related to his usage and not necessarily what you would expect to see from Landsknecht Emporium. Price-wise, I'm not sure, but I'll look it up and I'll find it and put it in the description down below, along with measurements, weapon dynamics, computer stuff, and all of that. Anyway, in terms of review stuff, I do want to point out one thing, so I'm not harping on it throughout the entire review. There is asymmetry and kind of errant hammer marks and tool marks and kind of the medieval aesthetic, if you want to call it that, or signs of human interaction and workmanship everywhere in the blade. And that is kind of part of the thought process or theory with Landsknecht Emporium and how they like to make stuff. Not that they can't necessarily beautify it more, but that comes at a cost with time. And I think the aesthetic that a lot of them, or that they tend to go for, is something that looks very human, right? So this is built with intent. That's kind of their style. It's represented and goes all the way through all of their swords. But the point that I'm trying to make is that if you really enjoy kind of machined perfection, you won't find an inch of this sword that you like. There's signs of unevenness and asymmetry and tool marks and things like that everywhere. And it has the merits of a sword. I'll just get straight to the point. It's a great sword. It feels fantastic, and it does things that other sword manufacturers don't in terms of taper and dynamics and feel in the hand. But at the same time, it's got a lot of tool markings on it. And if that's something that's going to bother you, then I don't know that Landsknecht Emporium is gonna be the one for you. But if you like the aesthetic, then it has kind of character to match and dynamics. So for what that's worth, again, measurements and dynamic calculators and all that jargon down in the description. All right, so I'm going to start the review with a pommel, as I often do. A couple things to note. I said I'm not going to talk about the unevenness and asymmetry. You can see that in the video, but there are some call-outs that I will make as I see them. Like right here, there's some resin or filler or epoxy or something like that that has changed the stain area on the wood, and I can see it visibly. You know, I spot the filler area. What it does is it makes this transition very comfortable on my hand. There's no ledge, nothing bites in, but it does make a little bit of a visual cue that I think stands out. Pommel shape is not one that I particularly like or find comfortable, and I will admit that it's kind of my least favorite part of the sword. Visually, I like it. It's certainly got a look to it, and it's commonplace as I understand it for a Katzbalger. I don't know how historic or accurate it is in terms of proportion, but I've seen Katzbalgers with this kind of pommel on it. Now, what does it do? It rests in basically you can swing it around. It keeps your fingers from falling off, but it kind of juts into the fat of your hand. Now, this is rounded, and of this type of pommel, this one is one of the more comfortable that I've felt. This pushes into my hand in a way that I would describe as snug and a bit uncomfortable, but it doesn't like rip my flesh off or bruise my palms or anything like that. So I found this to be certainly workable, and it's not large enough that it juts into my wrist when I necessarily hold it off that angle. Now you have to think about how to index it, and fortunately the grip, which I'll talk about in a moment, aids in that, because you kind of have to align it just a little bit differently, and then it doesn't pound into your wrist. But even if I do that, it is at most high pressure and uncomfortable, but not like a wrist breaker exactly. Anyway, I like that they've got little detailing and lines and stuff like that. I like that these kind of fluted lines flow all the way up through the guard. It ties things together nice visually. And then it also has this little brass floral area on the peen block over here where the peen is. It's obviously a little bit muddy, but at the same time, it's a nice little bit of detail, a nice little bit of adornment and decoration. The pommel, as you can see, is pretty meaty, and you can use it a lot more than maybe some pommels can. It stops right here, but I find myself holding on towards the base rather than choking up on the grip. I find myself holding it down here a little bit more comfortably. It kind of ties right into the grip, and so this grip is, I would describe it as small. It feels a little just teeny up towards the top of the grip right here. It has this kind of hexagonal section, and so this line, the edge of the guard, or the grip I should say, points out, and I find that it rests kind of pretty easily in my fingers in kind of the crook of my hand here. But I find it easy to index basically, and then this little flute right here, I find that my fingers kind of rest in there as well, and I feel like I really have good purchase on the sword. And if I try to twist it in my hand, even though it's a small grip, it moves, but it doesn't flip over exactly easily. So if you are binding and winding and the like, then this gives you some authority in the grip, I would say. Anyway, I find myself holding it more down here, and in this area, the kind of where it gets a little fatter, it's pretty comfortable to grab, and this little flute runs all the way through the grip. It definitely gives you a chance to purchase, but up towards the top where it meets the crossguard, this is a little small, and it's a little tough for me to feel stable in. Just moving a little bit down, I feel that stability that I like. Otherwise, yeah, I can make out the epoxy and the resin and the stuff where it meets the grip. I can see what looks like kind of the area where the tang slots through. As I move on to the crossguard here, it has kind of a twisted look to it. It has it looks like it's been twisted, and I'm not sure how if this is a forged guard or not. Or if these are ground in aesthetically, but Adventure, I guess they're probably forged in. Anyway, it's twisted, and that's at least the look. It's like a twisted or fluted metal. I can't remember exactly how they call that, with brass bits at the end. So thing that I'm noticing about the brass bits, though, and this is something that I notice in all of them, is there's some discoloration around it, and I'm not sure if it's the flux, the solder, exactly what's happened to cause these discolorations around here, but I do notice some of them and on the scabbard parts as well, which I'll show later. And it's, I don't know if I'd call it character. It's a little bit off-putting. I haven't tried polishing them or seeing if it's something that's removable, but I do see some staining and the like on these little brass bits on the end. That said, it's nice to see these additional little details on here. Not something that you see on a lot of crossguards made today. Before I move on, it's worth pointing out the gap in the crossguard, which is kind of funny. It's something that I've said there's errant tool marks and things like that everywhere in this sword, but this is a very, very tight crossguard gap right here. It's almost non-existent. So very well done in terms of how this particular area fits. I wasn't expecting it, given some of the other gaps. Like I can see gaps between this the end of this thing and over here. There's gaps that have been filled in over here, but the gap in the crossguard is top notch. I don't see a lot of space for any water residue to get in. It looks extremely well fit. Now I'm going to talk about the scabbard. One feature, it has these buy knives in it, which are snug to get in, which means they're snug to get out as well, so they don't fall out easily. Very simple knives. I don't know if it's worth going into a whole lot of detail about these things or not, but they're of reasonable manufacture. They have little pegs that are hollow pegs in them, so you can, I don't know that you would exactly tie much through them, but I guess you could. Reasonably sharp, reasonably well made, but simple little knives. I don't often tend to get them resting evenly in here, so that's worth noting. They are a little off center, I suppose. If you kept one sharp or one dull, or turned one into a fork or something like that, I suppose whichever one was higher, you would kind of be able to feel if they were just one was lower than the other. Anyway, I believe they're called buy knives, and there are two of them that rest in the scabbard. It's a cool little thing, though. I happen to really like these little knife pockets in here. It's a cool and fun feature. I don't think these are terribly expensive, all things considered. I'll put what I can find, but I think I've seen some other buy knife options from Landsknecht Emporium, and for what you get, I think they're a pretty awesome add-on. It's got the belt on here. I like this tying system that Landsknecht Emporium puts on. The overlapping belt seems to hold things on pretty snug. It looks pretty cool in my mind. I happen to like it. It also has this leather, it's not stamped, it's cut into the leather, and it has a nice kind of floral pattern that runs around, and some diamond patterns up here. Actually, I don't know if that's a floral pattern. I thought it was a floral pattern, but it's a geometric pattern on the surface or the face of it. It's covered up a little bit by this leather, but overall, it's certainly a handsome looking thing. As we go down, there's, I can make out, well, I suppose the important bit here is, again, Swordfriend Ian has said that this is not a safe queen, and he takes it out. So scabbards that have pings and dings and imperfections in the leather, that's kind of to be expected when they bounce around. So if I separate any of that could happen through normal wear and tear, what I see is just kind of streaking from the stains. Whether or not you like that, I guess is up to you, but I can see kind of the stain brush, if you will. And also on this piece down here, I make out these stains again that have happened in the brass. So we've got a little floral decoration down here. It's kind of a cool looking thing, but it's kind of been stained by the flux or something holding it together. I'm not exactly sure, but there are stains. There's a small rivet in here, and then you can also see where this pinches on the top. So there's gaps in here that are worth noting, and on the back here, again, I can see these stains, and I'm not sure what's causing them. But I would say I don't particularly like the stains. If I set aside the unevenness, asymmetry, that kind of stuff, and appreciate that, the stains, I don't know on the brass if that's something that I particularly enjoy. Anyway, as I move on, stitching is pretty even. It's done in the back. This leaves a ledge. It's not just glued down. It has a nice stitch trim. It feels very stable as a wood core scabbard, and if I put the sword in it, it also has a pretty good bit of tension. It doesn't fall out easily. None of the knives come out. With a good shake, it doesn't fall out, but a little pull and it loosens itself pretty quickly. So scabbard wise, apart from the fact that it has, some goofy bits on the brass shape on the bottom, I really like the scabbard. I like kind of the human detail in it. I like that it functions the way it's supposed to. I like the tensioning. Other than that, I think the scabbard's cool. The leather strap, the belt, all of that. It's on the wrong side for me, but apart from that, yeah, very good, very good. I happen to like it. Anyway, the blade, the pointy stabby part, the bit that I think a lot of people are most interested in. So it has this really cool 3-fuller area on the ricasso. It transitions to a dual fuller that runs about 2/3 up the blade and then transitions into just a flattened cross section. I'm not sure exactly how you call that. It doesn't have a prominent central ridge, and there's no prominent bevels anywhere other than the kind of secondary one that kicks it down towards the edge. The tip has some, it doesn't quite point straight. One angle is sharper than the other, so there's the bit of asymmetry that I'm going to call out there. But if I start from the base down here, again, transition really, really good next to the crossguard. I really like these 3 fullers. Do note that they kind of terminate in different spots on each side, but I really like the way they look. I think that is a really awesome, classy look. The sides are flat, and I don't see a lot of tool marks on the sides. You can get a finger over it, and when I do that, this grip feels very, very comfortable and locked in. I'm going to move down to the base of the blade, though, because I think that's maybe what you're more interested in. Again, we've got excellent transition here, and the ricasso is not sharpened for about 4 inches up the blade, I would say. And if you hold it in this grip, it feels really, really good. I can get a finger over it, and I feel like I have very precise control over the tip. I'm not sure that you would do that, but if you do, then this is about as comfortable as this kind of grip can be. It feels like it's very, very snug and controllable. Anyway, as it moves up, I want to point out kind of the taper. This gets very, very thin out towards the tip, and that's great. And it does have a little bit more flex, kind of more towards the center, but it's still kind of in the top third of the blade. It has reasonable amounts of taper. I'll put those measurements down below. But this thin cutting plane means that it really is a very effective cutter. I had very good luck cutting water bottles. Then much better luck than I typically do. Some of the bases stayed on. I'm not particularly proficient at cutting water bottles, so I tend to whack the bases all around, and very keen, very sharp swords that index weld tend to, for me anyway, have the bases resting. It's not because of my even hand. So I smacked the water bottles around, and it did a pretty good job in this cutting plane. It's nice and thin and sharp. Anyway, as I look, that cross section though is very interesting in how it transitions down. The fullers gradually go away. We've got a little detail marking here, and then it transitions to this kind of flattened plain cross section which really aids in the cuts. Moving this around, I'm unfamiliar with the type of sword, but I found it to be very comfortable to cut with. I cut water bottles, which I mentioned were very successful. I thought I did pretty good, or the cuts were pretty good. The edge on this is also quite sharp. It's got a little ding somewhere in here, which I'm going to assume is from it bouncing around somewhere with sword friend Ian. But the edge is very sharp, very keen. It's been bounced around. I didn't do anything to clean up the edge either, so the scabbard is not causing it to bounce around and dull over time. Anyway, it's holding up very well, and it works very well. I had a lot of luck in cutting. It was pretty fun. I took it to some branches as well, and it didn't bend at all. So the sword is still straight, it's still very sharp. I didn't see any dulling or anything from those things, and you shouldn't see dulling from the branches. You shouldn't see bending. But this is a thinner sword, and I thought, well, that's about as far as I would comfortably push it. It should do those things, and it did. I didn't really cut thousands of branches or anything like that, so how well it holds up over time, I don't know. But I'm not a particularly good cutter, so there was some stress on the blade, and it took it very well, despite being very thin. A lot of people might be pretty nervous to make a sword as thin as this, and I, tip of my hat to Landsknecht Emporium for doing it. Proportionally, I really like it, and it makes the sword have a certain character that it wouldn't otherwise. It doesn't feel clumsy or dumb in the hand. This feels like a great sidearm to pull out and move around and be quick with. How easy it is to bind and wind with these quillions, I don't know. But as for a sword in general, if I hold it and disregard my general dislike for this style of pommel, this is a very effective and fun-feeling weapon. Which is kind of odd, because I've only had a few Katzbalgers, but all of them have given me the impression that I can just pick it up and go. Some weapons, you pick them up, or some swords, you pick them up, and you're like, I better train and figure out how to use this. The katana, for example, is one where I pick it up and don't inherently feel overly confident with it. It feels like something I need to learn how to use, as do longswords. But Katzbalgers, for some reason, I've picked up a few good examples. This one from Tom Kinder a number of years ago, with the Gus trim blade, and both of them have given me the impression that you can just kind of pick it up and go. This pommel aside, it feels like a very intuitive, kind of instant connection kind of sword. So anyway, that's something that you don't necessarily get with every sword. It's something that I think is worth pointing out. The dynamics of this sword are very fun. The edge was sharp. It had some custom touches, but in terms of movement, somebody held it, thought about how it should feel, and put it into the sword. And that's not something that you always get with a sword, and I'm grateful to see it here. I'm grateful that so many of the swords I've reviewed recently have kind of had that sense of intent that transitions into your hand, and so it's cool that it's becoming more common, but still not something you get with every mass-produced sword. Which this isn't. This is a custom variety from Landsknecht Emporium. Now's the part of the review where I answer the question, do I personally think it's worth it or not? Now, I did find out from Sword friend Ian this is a $1,400 sword for the whole package. And for a moment, just let me explain what that is. You got a scabbard with a custom shape. You got a belt system. You got 2 buy knives, and you have a custom sword that is different than Landsknecht Emporium typically makes. They don't make swords like Katzbalgers with just a different hilt construction on this one to make it custom. They don't make Katzbalgers, at least I can't find them on their catalog. Obviously, they make them, but this is a custom sword from them. So all that stuff combined for $1,400 with a sword that dynamically feels quite good, is one of a kind, is made relatively thin but well, and holds its edge and doesn't bend, doing sword-like activities. Yes, I would say it's worth $1,400. Obviously, it's got some visual imperfections and things like that. I've made some complaints about the kind of narrowness of the grip here, though I'd venture a guess that this is probably representative of some of the historic pieces. Landsknecht Emporium tends to do a lot of research, so I'm guessing that for a Katzbalger, this is likely more accurate than not, though I'm not an expert in that area. Anyway, as it is, I would say yes, for $1,400, you're getting a one-of-a-kind looking piece with some cool stuff, a scabbard, the whole kit and caboodle. Yes, I do think it's worth it. Now, aesthetically, this is not my preference. I happen to like even lines, but there's not an option out there to just go buy something else in the Katzbalger category. It tends to be an underrepresented sword, and there's not just one that you could go out and get. So the fact that you can get it, and that you can get a whole package for $1,400 that is well made, I think is worth it. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Hopefully the review's been interesting. As always, cheers and thanks for watching.